Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Through My Eyes with Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. I'm sure this is going to be another exciting session. There have been so many issues, so many things going on around the world that we would love to hear the view of the professor on. Prof, you are welcome to the program again this evening, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's always a pleasure to team up with you and our legion of viewers.
Thank you so much, Prof. Now, before we go into the program today, Prof, there is a question I want to ask you about ships, because I'm not sure anyone has ever asked you whether you like going into ships or not.
Um, well, I mean, I've traveled on a passenger ships between the United States and Great Britain, and between Great Britain and Nigeria. Um, there are aspects of trips on ships that are not pleasant for, I suppose, a lot of people. But after probably 2 days, you then get used to the trip and you then enjoy it. The cuisine, interaction with fellow passengers, and just relaxation, reading on the deck. I've also taken two trips between Ghana and Nigeria on luxury yachts, private luxury yachts.
Wow.
And I guess I did enjoy that, especially watching them fish in the morning
Mhm.
for fresh fish in the afternoon as lunch. So I have.
Excellent. Prof, I only asked you that question because the first point that has come in as questions for you today is about the issue in the Suez Canal and that ship that got stuck in that canal. And just to hear what your views are on that, on that situation, Prof.
Well, that has put me off traveling by ship to start with. It has. But you see, the problem which we have is that technology and, if you like, you could call it greed, or you could call it asset capitalization, both are often ahead of existing facilities. Huge ships have been built, whether cargo or passenger ships, that have not been accompanied by massive restructuring of the Suez Canal. And I'm sure there are probably one or two other canals, not as famous as the Suez Canal, which also will have that problem. And it's only when you have what's just happened in the Suez Canal that people then think of investment in restructuring of the Suez Canal. So I think that what has just happened should concentrate the minds of policymakers in restructuring the Suez Canal, which is a massive investment, to accommodate the investment that they have put into shipbuilding, because it will be quite a disaster if it is a passenger ship that gets stuck. We would then be really thinking a lot about, how dangerous it is. Now, they say often somebody's disaster is another man's good fortune. Uh, when this disaster happened in the Suez Canal, some of the ships were then diverted through the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa to then come up the South Atlantic Ocean to Europe. And of course, that immediately increased revenue for the countries that are in that area. And people tend to forget that those countries lost a lot of revenue when the Suez Canal was opened, because before then, that was the route between Asia and Europe. Um, so again, to me, this will be a signal to the countries of Africa that are on the seashore, not to, because of the Suez Canal, let their ship accommodating facilities go into despair or into decay, because you just don't know when disaster is going to strike somewhere and you will need those facilities. But let us thank God that within a few 4 days or so, that ship was refloated, um, due to the skill of the Egyptians, but also due to an act, a divine act of God, in the sense that not only did the wind die down, but also the what do you call it now? The tide rose up sufficiently to assist them in pushing that ship back into the central canal. If the tide had not risen and risen sufficiently, we still may be talking about a ship struck in the canal. So a combination of human skill and divine act.
Prof, there's a question here from someone saying that one thing that has come out of this as well is the fact that they had to start looking for equipment to try to get the ship out, looking for assistance from all different sources. And they're drawing the parallel to some of these very critical installations that it seems like we have no risk planning around them. And when you look at even the pandemic, there was a sense of it could happen, but maybe it wouldn't happen. What are your thoughts on that risk aspect of it?
Um, that's a very good question. Um, I mean, one doesn't like blowing one's horn, but I remember when I became the Director General of the Institute of International Affairs, the electricity generating capacity at the Institute was minimal, with the result that each time light was taken, activities got paralyzed at the Institute. And so I did apply to government for funds to have a Siemens generator installed. And when I told Siemens what I wanted, I said I wanted a generator that will last 20 years. And they said, "What do you need that for?" I said, "I like to plan for plenty. I don't like to plan for scarcity. I don't want to change this generator in 2 years' time or in 5 years' time. I want it to last 20 years. And they said, "Do you realize then that the capacity of the generator you are asking for can actually supply electricity to the whole of Victoria Island?" I said, "Good. That's what I wanted." But I am aware that especially government does not often like to plan for something that will last a lifetime. Uh, they may argue that it's because they don't have sufficient funds. Therefore, why don't you just have this and plan for 2 years or 3 years? I personally like to plan for eternity. And I think that what we gain with sin, one of the lessons we should have learned or we should learn from the Suez Canal crisis is what whoever sent in that question has pointed out, that now the Egyptians themselves should be thinking they know the capacity of the ship that got stuck. They don't know when it will happen again. They should, and they know the equipment they have had to bring in, whether they hired it or borrowed it or what have you. This is the capacity they should now be buying into installation. But then again, as I said, I know government doesn't work that way. People in the Ministry of Finance will claim that they don't have the kind of resources to plan for plenty, just have enough to get by.
Wow. Thank you for that analysis, Prof. And while we're kind of talking about that block there, we've had the news of an attempted coup in Niger. Um, how do you react to that news, Prof?
Um, I don't feel comfortable about that news. Let's make it global and let's look at where this thing started. Remember that under Trump, attempts were made, I think, in Venezuela to sponsor a coup d'etat. And so he started this swing towards the man on horseback, the military, as an agent of change. It started in the middle of the Trump administration. And then they tried it in Mali, and then it swung to Asia and what have you. And if you look at the way ECOWAS handled the Mali coup d'etat, because it was a successful coup d'etat, and we discussed this on this program, and I remember saying that the compromise in Mali was just using the fig leaf of democracy to cover the nakedness of a successful coup d'etat. They eventually got the military to agree to appoint a civilian president by themselves. But the head of the military will be the vice president. And then again, the military appointed someone of their choice as the foreign minister or the prime minister, and so on and so forth. So really, it was a successful coup. It was just that instead of the head of the military being called president, they called him vice president. But you will know who will be calling the shots. And then you have Myanmar, where a lot of bloodshed is still going on, and the military is still entrenched. So the boys in Niger, maybe they are unhappy with the result of the election, now tried their own hand. It failed somehow, but I don't think we've had the last of it. And then look at the variation we now have in Brazil, where where the head of the army, head of the navy, and head of the air force have resigned all on the same day because what the president of Brazil wanted to do, they refused to go along with him. Now, instead of overthrowing him, they resigned. But that has created a crisis of its own. Of course, you see, in the case of Brazil, it's a question of what goes round comes round. in order to prevent Lulu coming back in the last election, the military kind of sent, a behind the scene message to the judiciary that they don't want Lulu to be given an opportunity to to contest the election. And so the judiciary came up with what everybody was clear in his mind was, a kangaroo judgment, uh, jailing Lulu, a sentence now which I'm not sure whether it has been set apart or not, but it's now become clear that they were responding to message from the military. It is the same military that is now being clobbered by the president of Brazil, who himself was a retired captain in the army and had been involved in shenanigans while he was still in the military. So I hope we are not now seeing a return to military intervention all over the world in order to in order to a return by the military to intervene in civilian process of governance for whatever reason. I hope we are not starting to see a return to that.
Prof, there's a question here, and it says that how do we ensure that the military are not able to intervene this way?
Good governance, good governance, good governance. Popular civilian government, the military itself. See, the military reads the political temperature of the country before they attempt whatever it is they want to attempt. Because what they would really like to know is whether they get away with civilian support in some cases. And it's but there are some cases where the military becomes the voice of the people when governance has been very bad, electioneering has been very bad, and the result of the election lacks credibility. Then the military believes it will now act on the side of the people, acting as a voice of the people, as an agent of stability. When all these things are not there, the military is very likely not to get involved. If elections are free and fair, there's very little corruption, governance is clean and open, the military itself will know that coming in will create problems of credibility for the military.
Prof, there's a point here before we leave Africa and relates to this airstrike by French forces in Mali, where they shot into a crowd, which turned out to be a wedding filled with civilians. Now, a UN report has said that the French really did shoot at civilians. And in fact, I quote what they say here: the group affected by the strike was overwhelmingly composed of civilians who are protected persons under international humanitarian law. Prof, how do they get it so wrong?
I think you are being kind. Did they really get it wrong? Or they just didn't care? What was the objective of the airstrike? You see, the moment the age of drones came into being and the way and manner drones have been used over the years has shown an I don't care attitude about civilians who are then regarded as collateral damage. And I'm using that term, I'm borrowing that term from Colin Powell in the first Iraq uh, uh, war. Yes, in the first Iraq war, um, when civilians were killed by American bombing, and when that was raised with him, he simply dismissed it as that's the first Gulf War. He just dismissed it as collateral damage. And since then, civilian casualties had accompanied use of drones, that it will now be extended to the use of the Air Force in dealing with issues in urban areas. It has become just passe. The French may apologize that they were not aware that it was a civilian gathering. But then why use uh, um, Air Force bombing in an urban area? Basically, is the amount of Libyan civilians who died during the bombing by the NATO Air Force in Libya during the insurrection against Gaddafi is mind-boggling. So it's not new. It has just become an affected facet of war, especially when it involves the first when it involves first line countries and developing countries.
Prof, let me move the conversation on to UK and Europe as we start to look at some of the new developments regarding COVID-19 and the World Health Organization. But let's deal with COVID-19 first. Now, the Prime Minister of Great Britain is joining other prime ministers to call for a global treaty in preparation for the next pandemic. Now, this is something you called for on this program many months back as something to be considered. What do you think of that idea now, Prof?
Um, Sorry, a little correction. I wasn't calling for it to be considered. I made reference to the likely consequence of the COVID-19 and a likely development in the post-COVID-19 diplomatic activity, because a former Prime Minister of Great Britain had, in an attempt to discredit the WHO, called for a new organization that would deal with pandemics, the next one. I thought the issue had died out, but now we can see that it has been resurrected and several world leaders had signed on to this. To me, this is a vote of no confidence in the WHO, especially in its relationship with China. Now, this is unfortunate because anytime that an international organization does something that the superpowers or one superpower does not like, they start talking about a new one. Who says that that new one is going to have the support of all the superpowers? Who says? And unfortunately, this has come at a time when the WHO report on their visit to China has just been released to try to find out where COVID-19 came from. A lot of people, scientists, politicians in the West are unhappy about that WHO report. That WHO report basically reflects the point of view of China. Now, I'm not a scientist. I don't know whether they are telling the truth, the report, I mean, whether it's telling the truth or not. But my own point of view is, you see, it's so easy to make an organization a scapegoat for what you don't like, especially when that organization is being headed by a citizen of a third world country. In this particular case, the WHO is headed by an Ethiopian diplomat. Don't forget that. If you form a new organization and there is a pandemic, because scientists have told us that another one will come, and a new pandemic, but this time comes from country X that happens to be a superpower. Who told you that that country X, a superpower, is still going to cooperate with the new international organization set up to come into his country and investigate? I remember when I was a graduate student, and the United Nations used to send investigating teams when there were issues that will come before the United Nations. And they will send them out, go and investigate, prepare a report, and let us have it. The American Senate was scathing in its denunciation of any attempt by the United Nations to send an investigating team into the United States to investigate the status of African Americans. They were scared and they prevented it. And the attitude was, who the United Nations that they fund and will now all of a sudden come and investigate them? Forgetting that the United States has been voting for investigative teams to go into other countries. So I probably think that the WHO is not going to be able to stop the development of a new medical world organization, or maybe they will call it an international pandemic organization, so to restrict its mandate. But
But Prof,
it's not going.
I have a question for you here. Because when we look at some of the things that the report was alluding to, while we cannot say categorically because we don't have the hard evidence, but we know that China reported this strange thing they were seeing. It came out, and for them to now say it's not conclusive, isn't that in itself a sense that maybe WHO is truly not that independent organization that it should be?
No. If you ever listen to scientists talk, or even lawyers, if you ever listen to them talk, the report didn't say that this thing, COVID-19, the report didn't say it didn't emanate from China. It didn't say so. But it said, where did it come from? Was it bats? Was it turtle? Was it, human beings to human beings? Or was it from a laboratory virus that escaped from a lab? They said they just don't know. And that is scientists for you being very careful that until we see sufficient evidence, so specific that all other kinds of explanation had been excluded, we cannot say it came from a bat, or it came from a lizard, or it came from a bushmeat. But they didn't say that didn't come from China. They did not say so.
All right, Prof. Thank you for that analysis there. Let's go to Italy, Prof. There are quite a lot of questions from all over that we have today, and this is a note from the Italian foreign minister announcing that Italy had expelled two Russian officials on the basis of espionage. What do you say to that, Prof?
Well, the what to call them now? They were caught pants down. Well, I mean, it's like the videotape of the policeman's knee on the neck of the ongoing trial in the United States.
Yes, of George Floyd.
An Italian naval officer was caught trying to hand documents over to a Russian spy. Now, the evidence doesn't come any more clearer than that. Spies are not supposed to be caught that way. You are supposed to have a secret dropping point where you will leave the incriminating document, and then you let the other side know that you have dropped it behind a tree or on a branch of an apple tree, and it should then go there and collect it. But to meet face to face, actually, it does show that they were probably amateur spies. But once that is done, the Italians have no other choice but to deal with it in the procedure that's well laid down over the years. You expel the diplomats from one side, and the other side retaliates by expelling your own diplomats. The countries never accept on that they are spying on each other, but I'm just surprised that at this time of tension between Russia and the United States, a new administration, that there will be no tempering down of what amounts now to direct confrontation between Russia, and if the allegation is true that these were NATO documents, then it is not just an affront and a danger to Italy, is to NATO. And therefore, Italy has no alternative but to do what it has done. What we should be watching out for is whether, in retaliating, other NATO countries could then be provoked into getting involved, that because these were NATO documents that were about to be stolen, they will now expel Russian diplomats.
Mhm. Prof, let's move over to the United States and start first with the ongoing trial of the murder of George Floyd. As we have seen, some of that footage has been replayed in the media, and we're seeing some of those pictures again. And we also start to hear some more testimonies and unseen footage. But uh, for some, it's been so touching, Prof. What is your take from what is going on there?
I wasn't, and I am not immune from human reaction to what we have seen exhibited in the court time and time again. We were thinking it was just 8 minutes and 30 something seconds. Now we know that it's 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Um, and again, to listen to that voice and to just watch the face of the policeman. And you kind of wonder, is this man human? The sound that is coming from under your knee, to hear it as it fails, as it turns into gasp, he was begging. He wasn't challenging you. He was begging. And you just, and this policeman just stood there and turned around to look, even when people were saying, drawing his attention to the fact that this man's life was in danger. Uh, People came, the lady who is a dispatcher from the fire department, one of those who are the first correspondents, trained that when you get to the scene of a fire accident and there are victims involved, what to do. She was begging them to check his pulse. She was trying the attention to check his pulse. The police still ignored this. Well, in law, they said, wait until you've heard the other side. Um, and I know, we can see from the initial statements that the defense, that they are going to say it used drugs, medication. Uh, he had struggled with the police. Um, he had attempted to pass a forged $20 note. And I say, yeah, okay, we've heard you. But does that justify the knee on his neck for 9 minutes, 29 seconds? All the things you are saying. And here is the report by the medical officer who examined, his body, and who said it's homicide. Homicide is unlawful killing at the hands of the police. So I don't know how I will still wait until I hear their side. But believe me, nothing justifies what's happened to that man. Nothing. I know there was a similar case in New York. New York, of all places that we would think as civilized, and so, where the prosecution decided not to prosecute the police because the gentleman involved had a large heart, and that therefore he would have died anyway from that large heart. But will he have died at that time? So, at times when people talk about the judicial or the legal system having systemic racism, it kind of makes you wonder, and people deny it, kind of makes you wonder what they're talking about. But
Yes.
there are times I have turned away from watching this trial. I just couldn't take it anymore, you know? So
Yeah, Prof. I think this is one of those issues because in the UK, a government body issued this report, which effectively concluded that the UK doesn't have institutional racism going on. And we're starting to see the ripple effects of that. Resignations of senior advisors to the prime minister have started to come in because of this statement. And Prof, it continues to beat me, and I think so many other people, how we can reach such conclusions knowing where the world is today, that institutional racism doesn't really exist the way a
who
lot of people
wrote
experience it.
what is the racial complexion of the body that wrote that report? I would like to know. No, you if you ask a body of turkeys to write about Christmas, do you think they are going to emphasize the divinity of Christ, or they will emphasize that they, turkeys, are victims of um Christmas, because most of them get killed in celebrating Christmas? But now change the composition of that body and make it mostly Christian men and women writing the report. Are they going to focus on what turkeys feel about Christmas, or they will focus on their own perception? So it depends. To think that we human beings are emotionally neutral in our perception of events around us is one of the major fallacies in our thinking and in our philosophies. It depends on your background and where you are coming from. If it's been women who wrote the report on the police handling of that London demonstration by women, because that woman got killed by a policeman, the report you will get will be different from what this police oversight committee has written. You know, it's one of the, we deceive ourselves if we say we have no sin and the fault is not in us. We deceive ourselves.
Wow. Um, while we're still on the United States, and let's end with President Biden. Um, it seems, Prof, that a president has come in and he's sticking to some of his campaign promises, and he's actually ticking off the boxes on uh, some of these promises, and his popularity seems to be growing. 100 million vaccinations over, he's now shifted that to 200 million. Some are now saying maybe the 100 million was too small before. Prof, what do you say about President Biden and how he has performed so far?
A president has not come in. A leader has come in. A leader with a vision, a leader with a correct assessment of what is wrong with America, a leader with a correct assessment of what needs to be done to correct the evil in American society. And my respect for Joe Biden as a leader, believe me, has doubled since he won the election. I was worried a little bit at the beginning when when he kept emphasizing that he was going to work in collaboration with the Republicans, because I know that this set of Republicans in the Senate and in Congress are up to no good except to derail him. And I'm happy when he got up before the American people and said, I said I will work in collaboration with Republicans. And the public opinion polls show that the average Republican is in support of me, is the people, the representatives, the Republicans in Congress who are busy doing their own thing. And I'm happy that he has now decided that he will take them on headlong and do whatever it is that the law will permit him to do. His emphasis on infrastructural development, because American roads, airports, no, water system have really gone into massive decay. That's not the America that I studied in the 1960s. Infrastructural human development had gone into disarray. And this is where China has gone ahead now of the United States. And I believe that if infrastructural human development that President Biden has in mind is implemented, and I think there should be a third leg to it, which is to uphold the educational system of the United States with sufficient allocation of resources to the scientific field. The United States may actually win back its position in terms of human assets, human development, and what have you. But I believe America is lucky to have a Biden at this time.
Um, Prof, do you think that this is now going to start to create more of a challenge for the Republican Party come elections? And do you also think that he's building back that credibility that we all saw eroded in that American system? Is what he's doing now starting to bring that back and return that confidence to America?
I think so. There is a distinction between being powerful and being great. Um, America is still a powerful country. It's still a powerful world leader. But surprisingly, under Trump, it lost its greatness. It became a country of derision. It became a country that lost respect. Under Biden, even though he has not even spent 100 days, I believe that it is starting to get back that respect. And if he achieves the goals he set for himself in one, human rights, two, the objectives of the COVID-19 bill, um, and now the infrastructural bill, the program, and if he could block off the attempt by state houses, Republican-controlled state houses, to impose what will amount to a retrogressive voting, a reversal of the voting rights gains of almost the past 40 years. If you could block that off, believe me, not only will President Biden be regarded as a great president, it will claw back some of the greatness of America.
Prof, there's one question I want to put to you as we start to close for this evening. And it's this call about a vaccine passport that is putting so many people under some pressure from what we've seen. What are your views on this? Because it's coming more into the fore now, where some national leaders are starting to talk about having an international vaccine passport as almost an inevitable situation. What do you think to this, Prof?
I grew up. I think I started flying by plane internationally in 1962. Um, and I grew up at that time when I must have a yellow card pamphlet, passport, document, whatever you want to call it, in addition to my passport to be able to travel. And in that document will be evidence that I've had yellow fever vaccination, whether I've had, I think, measles vaccination, smallpox vaccination. It was routine. It was passe. It was not controversial until they started wiping out those, diseases. And then finally, the yellow fever card was no longer necessary. Although last year, regulations were starting to come back that I think they think that the yellow fever was starting to come up again, and that they will now again want vaccination cards to show that. So what's the big deal? We've always had health cards, especially when you are traveling across boundaries. So why is everybody making a song and dance about vaccine for COVID-19? You will just add another extra page to the health cards that we've been carrying around from, at least since I've been traveling in the 60s. So what is the big deal? If people have nothing better to do but start an argument over where there is no argument, oh well. But when your people then stop being allowed to travel, then don't complain that there is discrimination. Because I think that after what we've gone through with this pandemic, especially now there's a third wave that is attacking Europe. We don't know how many waves we are going to have. And if people now, countries now decide, because already countries are starting to decide that you cannot, Germany simply said it's not going to allow French people to come across its border into Germany because a third wave has hit France. If they now decide that unless you are carrying that certificate, we won't allow you to fly into our country. So what are you going to do? Invade them and force your people to be allowed into their, it's an unnecessary controversy. And I believe that we are going to have a COVID-19 certificate, vaccine certificate. I believe so.
Well, Prof, I asked.
Fortunately, since I've got mine, I don't mind any certificate. In fact, they gave me a certificate that shows when I should turn up for the second vaccine. So I already have it.
Prof, I was going to ask you that very question. That now that you've taken the vaccine, how do you feel 1 week on?
Well, you could see the way my mouth is running that I don't seem to have suffered any side effect. Um, no swelling of anything. I've slept well, no headache, nothing. I'm aware that there are some people who have had some side effects. But as I've said on this program, I know medication which I must not touch because I'm allergic to the ingredients. But then that does not mean that that medication is bad for the whole world. It just means that in my own makeup, I cannot tolerate it. But it looks like I can tolerate the COVID-19 vaccination. Others cannot tolerate it, or they have side effects for a few days, and then they get back onto. I mean, when I got my smallpox vaccination, and I'm now talking about 1952 or so, it swelled up, which it was supposed to do. I had a slight fever, and then the thing finally dried up, and I'm forever vaccinated against smallpox, and I'm alive. So what is it?
Oh, wow. Prof, thank you so much for that. And I think that on that note, we end the program tonight. Um, and the message is go get your vaccine if you can. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Prof, as usual, and to our viewers on all the channels. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. As usual, last Thursday of the month is a town hall session. The last session was just amazing. Please go back, watch that clip. It's on the YouTube channel um, at Syncterface Media. You will find it there. And also some of the snippets that have been going on our website, tmeinsights.com, tmeinsights.com. Please do check those out for more information. And let me see, just make sure I have no outstanding questions from anyone. I think we are good. And I remember you said I should not ask you to give your parting shot, Prof. So I will not ask for a parting shot tonight. So thank you very much to our viewers. We'll be back again, same time next week, 7 p.m. British summertime, 7 p.m. in Nigeria. That's where we take our anchor from. So good night. Thank you. Have a nice evening.